Hey, Sens fans, welcome to Season 4, Episode 22 of the Senstennial Podcast, a member of the Hockey Podcast Network. And this week, we're saying goodbye to yet another season of your Ottawa Senators and yet another season without playoff games featuring the Sens. It is a
Yeah.
sad time, but it is also a time for us to reflect on the madness that was the 2022-23 season. And we're going to go over some comments made by Pierre Dorion, and then we're going to give our own thoughts on the season. And Bennett and his cat Archer are going to give
Let's
us
go, Archer.
gonna
Big kitty
Making a rare
energy.
appearance.
It's a DeBrincat. Let's
yeah, that's an omen.
go.
DeBrincat signing
Sign
long
of
term.
things to come.
Thank you, Archer, for adding entertainment to that introduction. And then yeah, we'll close out the show with our Senstennial Awards, which, if you remember from last year at the end of the season, we gave out awards for our most impressive, most disappointing, and most surprising players. And if you haven't seen that episode, well, now it's time for you to get to discover that truly beautiful part of our end of year podcast. So, kicking things off with the Pierre Dorion comments, his media presser today. He spoke about the elephant in the room. Yet I guess it's the opposite of an elephant because Alex DeBrincat's 5'7". But anyway, yeah, Alex DeBrincat. He's an RFA. The Sens said they're going to offer him a qualifying offer, so that'll at least give him 1 year being with the Ottawa Senators, unless someone offer sheets him. And yeah, he said he would let Pierre Dorion know before the draft what he was leaning towards, either if he's open to signing a long-term extension or if he's going to take that qualifying offer and then see what happens going into this year. Or if Ottawa wants to trade the asset. And I guess ownership and the future of team are both his concerns. So with that in mind, Matt, I'll let you kick things off. And what did you think about that bit in his presser?
It's definitely, something that Sens fans are concerned about. Absolutely losing a two-time 40-goal scorer, a guy who just put up close to 70 points on the season and had a disappointing year. I think we have not seen the best of Alex DeBrincat, and I don't think Alex DeBrincat has seen the best of the Ottawa Senators just yet. And I think that's probably going to factor into a lot of things going forward. He wants to see that the team is moving in the right direction. And, as Sens fans, we can all see that absolutely it is. But, realistically, it might be for him like, one, ownership. He wants to get all that stuff figured out. But two, I think Alex DeBrincat's style of play is not suited to the current coach we have. And he's even said, at the start of the season, I was really struggling to find my game between the style I like to play and the system that is in place. This system that, exists apparently. But so I think that's definitely the biggest question mark for DeBrincat. And there's family factors as well. It's if his wife and child, probably less so child, but do they like being here in Ottawa? Is it a place they can be for the rest of their lives, or at least the rest of his career, essentially? And it's a whole multitude of factors, but I would really like to see him sign long term. I think it's a smart decision, a smart hockey decision at the very least. And it's a beautiful city, and it seems like the room is excellent. And Jacob Chikrin said, like, I can't wait to come back next year and play with this amazing group in this amazing city. So let's hope all those vibes rub off on Stinky DeBrinky.
Yeah, and I'll throw that over to Bennett. Bennett, are you feeling in the same way as Matt? Are you optimistic for DeBrincat's return, or what does that look like for you?
I would say that I'm relatively optimistic of his return. I know that there was rumblings earlier this week, courtesy of one Bruce Garriock, that that DeBrincat had no desire to re-sign in Ottawa, but I don't think that is the impression that I got from what Dorion was saying. Dorion made it sound like he's like he's concerned about the ownership situation. And I think we all are, and that's going to have such a big bearing on the next couple of months of the Sens' future and the futures of not just guys like Alex DeBrincat, but also Pierre Dorion and DJ Smith. I personally see a scenario where new ownership comes in. Hopefully that's sorted within the next few weeks. You know, I'd like to see them clear house in our front office and at the coaching level and give DeBrincat and a lot of other guys clean slates. Many of whom don't need a clean slate per se, but maybe DeBrincat does. I mean, you alluded to it, Nave. Like, I think he had a very good season. Like, despite the fact that he didn't hit that 40 goal mark, we had 3 players that hit 35. It's like it's sort of 6 of one, half a dozen of the other. We all thought he'd be our 40 goal scorer and that'd provide all the goals we need, but we scored more goals than we did last year. And you know, he still had a good season, so it's all good as far as I'm concerned. And yeah, I'd like to see him stay. I think the only scenario in which I would want to see him moved, and even that is, you know, probably like overselling a little bit, is if moving DeBrincat, if we qualify him, he doesn't look like he wants to resign, and we're able to move him to get like a legitimate starting goalie, that's something I would support. I don't think it would be my preference. I think my preference would be to keep re-sign DeBrincat and somehow figure out to get a good goalie here, which is easier said than done, but I think that would be my preference. But if there is a scenario where he doesn't want to re-sign here long-term, we're able to trade him at the draft to get an actually good goalie who can be our guy this coming season and hopefully for seasons after that, then I would be okay with it. But I think we'd all want to see him sign here. We all know that he can hit 40 goals. That, you know, magical number. I mean, like, hell, like Stützle hit 39 and he's 21, and you know, that's playing with like, you know, like that's playing without Norris in the lineup, right? You know, like there's so many things that could go better next year. New coach, better personnel, like fewer injuries that could see DeBrincat, you know, hit that level that we wanted him to hit, and so I'd like to see him have that opportunity.
Yeah. I can't disagree with any points you guys made. You made some great points. I personally would love to see DeBrincat back on a long-term extension as well. I personally think that he's not the guy you move to make room for a goalie, and I understand that it's just his contract uncertainty that question has come up a lot in different, you know, public forums and online. I just think that you want a guy like that. You know, he's not Mike Hoffman where he's a one-trick pony. You know, he's a guy who he can score, he can dish. He had a career high in assists this season. And with Norris back next year, hopefully for the entire season, you know, fingers crossed, he can get even more assists and hopefully even if he doesn't hit 40, I mean, with the firepower that the Sens would have in their top 2 lines, even if he hit 30, 35, I think that's all you need out of him. To really have a successful season next year.
Absolutely.
But anyway, speaking of other guys who are on expiring contracts, we have, in a different way, but we have unrestricted free agents Cam Talbot and Nick Holden, who Pierre Dorion said would not be returning to the team. I think it makes sense on the Cam Talbot front. They said that in January they were looking at a 1-year extension. Cam Talbot wanted 2. Bruce Garriock said that Cam Talbot was apparently, according to sources, looking at about $4.5 million a year, which I think is quite high for him. And I was talking to Matt Nafe before the show, and I was telling him that I think his contract, it would be kind of more comparable to like a Jake Allen, you know, getting in that mid $2 million range. I think that makes more sense for a guy like him. I don't think he had a great season in Ottawa, but I also don't think that that's the expected performance of him. I think he can play better. I just don't think the fit is in Ottawa. And yeah, Ottawa, I think, will have to address the goaltending by their means. So he's out the door. And Nick Holden just kind of makes sense with all the depth that's coming in on the blue line. He's just getting pushed out. So I'll take, you know, either of your guys' thoughts on those 2 guys not returning to the Sens.
Yeah. Well, I think sorry, I'll be
sorry.
brief,
I should have handed that over better.
No. It's okay. I'll be brief. I think we're going to talk about goaltending in a minute, so we can, or probably at a later point in this podcast, coming soon, we will be talking about goaltending. And so Talbot will get his due. I fully support letting him walk. And then just a brief thing about Holden. I mean, he's a great guy. Vibes are good. Everyone likes him. Respected guy in the room. Fun in interviews and that kind of thing. But he took a step back this season, and we have better defenders coming in the pipeline. You know, our defensive core it looks really good on paper now going into next season, and there's not a place for Holden when we have Chikrin and Sanderson and Bernard Docker and Shabbat and Zub and Thompson and Brandstrom and all of these good defenders. Like we don't need a guy like Holden. But that being said, I mean, he was fine. Obviously he took a step back this year, but no ill will to the guy. He's great to have around, and wish him well.
Yeah, Bennett hit every point I was going to make about Holden. He was an absolute professional when he was here. I think he provided a lot in the locker room, stability on the blue line. When we got him from Vegas, I was really quite surprised at how good he was. And I was like, why have they given him up? But as Bennett said, he did take a step back this season, and the guys are ready to take the next step. One of the points in Dorion's presser was that it's JBD's spot to lose on that blue line, and I thought that was a really, really big point that he just made. And then quickly on Cam Talbot, Matt, you made a great point about Jake Allen, but I almost feel like he played himself out of that salary range, and I would not be surprised to see him signing a $1.5 million deal next season to back up a team. Maybe it's the Rangers, or the Lightning or something like that. But DJ was really focused on riding Talbot because of his veteran capability and whatnot, and I think that bit us a little bit because Forsberg was just flat out better this season. And unfortunately, Forsberg had to deal with those injuries. But no ill will to Cam Talbot, no ill will to Nick Holden. Love Holden, and the vibes are immaculate with that guy.
Yeah, and I would like to do a video at some point, kind of recapping the goaltending for this season, looking at some of Hockey Viz's analytics on how the teams played in front of the goaltenders, and also kind of where their weak spots and maybe their best spots for making saves were, and we can get into that in another episode. But we'll look at the UFAs who could return. Now, Pierre Dorion said that Brassard would be offered a PTO, which is great. I think, that injury obviously was brutal, and I hope he recovers well, but it's nice that they'll at least offer him a PTO and see where his game is at come camp. Watson, the club apparently was open to giving him a 1-year deal. He wants to look at free agency and see if he can get a multi-year deal. I don't blame him. A guy like that, he's nearing the point in his career where I think he would only get 1-year league minimum deals. So to try and cash in on kind of the hype down the stretch of how he played and get a 2-year deal, I can't blame the guy for looking. And Hamonic apparently wants to also look at free agency. However, Dorion said that they're open to bringing him back, but because Ottawa will be a cap team, God, haven't heard that in a long time. It'll be a bit of a what do you call that? A bit of hard work to make sure you can get everybody under the cap, I guess. And also Patrick Brown is a possibility to come back, but not much info on that. So I mean, all depth guys. I'll pass it to Matt. Like, any comments really on any of those depth guys?
Yeah, I would move on from all of them personally. Watson, he was a good soldier, but there are guys that play better hockey that are sitting in the AHL right now. Patrick Brown, same deal. Travis Hamonic, if he signs to like an $850 type, like $850,000 for a year, like, sure. And I think by the sounds of it, that's really the only situation that's going to work. And I wouldn't be surprised if he took it because his family likes it here, he likes it here, and that's about it. But other than that, like, there are guys waiting in the wings that we can improve our bottom six with, and probably find guys available in free agency.
Yeah, it's interesting with these guys. I think it's a little bit of a mixed bag. Like Patrick Brown can walk. I don't care about him at all. I have absolutely no opinion of the guy. Brassard, I liked having him around. I think, the vibes when he had his 1000th game, he had a really great performance that night. I think people like having him around. He has a little bit of skill.
And totally forgot about Brassard. I would bring him back on the fourth line. Sorry for interrupting.
No, that's cool. Of course, the big X factor for him is his age and the fact that he had a relatively major injury near the end of the season, and that was very well the kind of situation that a person could retire on. Considering they just hit 1,000 games, a major milestone. He's unlikely to, hit any other major milestones at this point in his career. That's kind of like, he got to have that night. It was really special for everyone involved. And, he got to go out on a relative high with the notable exception of having that injury. So I could very well see him, riding off into the sunset. But if he's able to, be healthy again and come back in a PTO and earn a spot, by all means, I'd love to have him around. That was good. Hamonic, I think, is the most interesting of these cases because he said publicly a couple of weeks ago that he would really like to stay. And I think that he's a guy that other people in the room seem to like and that Dorion was very complimentary of. It prompted a lot of discussion on Sens Twitter about the utility of keeping him around, even on like a league minimum contract. As stated before, I think we have so many good defenders that like it would have to be as like a 7th D-man situation. Yeah. And I'm not totally sure if that would be, if he like really likes it here and would be willing to accept that, then like, sure, I wouldn't hate that. But I don't know. It just seems like he probably wants to be like actually playing a hockey, and we don't really want him to be doing that here. He can flatter to deceive at times, and I know that he's he's a warrior and he blocks shots and does all that stuff, but blocking shots is one of those things that you do as a last resort because you're still giving up a shot to the other team. Best defenders don't have to block a lot of shots because they break up plays before they become problems. And Hamonic doesn't really do that so much because he's not one of the best defenders. So it's one of those situations where it's like he does the flashy defensive thing that like old school coaches and fans really love to see because it looks cool on TV. And it's just like, oh, hard hockey, man, that's hard hockey thing. But I just it's not the most useful defensive skills. And that's kind of like the only noteworthy thing that he seems to do. So I don't know. I mean, like, purely for vibes, if they want to keep him around on a league min and just like bring him out like once a fortnight to just like play 10 minutes, sure. But I just don't think that is useful to anybody. And lastly, I think Austin Watson, kind of similar thing. It's like you said, Matt, like we have better players that could fill his position, but everyone really likes the guy. And, Dorion absolutely gushed about Watson as like a person. He was like, this is one of the finest people I've ever met. Everyone looks up to him in the room. He's great for keeping everyone accountable and stuff like that. Like, that's all great. And I love to see that. I think that maybe the last couple of seasons, he sort of like imparted all of that kind of like good vibes and energy that he can. And that like keeping him around to do that when there's other players that can do what he does, except be good. Well, not be good.
A roster spot.
Yeah, it's just like, he was kind of good at parts of the season, but not like really good enough to like actually, justify signing him to a new deal. He was like good at parts when it's like, this guy's on the team. If he plays good, that's great. But was it enough to like earn himself a new contract? Like, probably not. Anyway, I know I'm rambling, but it's just like there's some very interesting discussions here among these depth players, and Hamonic and Watson in particular. But I don't know. I don't think they need to come back.
I'm of the same mind of you guys when it comes to Watson and Hamonic. Hamonic's actually interesting. Like, I agree on the block shots portion when it comes to the 5-on-5 defense. The amount of shots you're blocking when it's on 5-on-5 is usually because you're playing in your own end, and the pressures against you. Interestingly enough, on the penalty kill, his analytics were actually much better because blocking shots and playing that warrior mentality on the penalty kill actually tends to be more rewarding anyway. So that was kind of interesting to me anyway, the discrepancy there. But yeah, I'd say like Watson, I like the energy, like the passion of the guy. Definitely got the team fired up, even though he wasn't the best fighter when he did win a fight. Everyone, fans included, like, yeah, let's go. He won a fight.
Yeah.
But yeah, I guess going into next season, like it's time to upgrade the bottom six and bring in guys to actually help you take the next step. I actually personally really liked the Tyler Mott signing. I think that was a very savvy move by Dorion. It didn't exactly work out, but that's the kind of signing the Sens need to make, and bringing guys like that if they want to see some success in the postseason. And yeah, Matt, I'll let you get your thoughts.
Yeah, and I just think like trading Mott for an asset that can actually be useful was also a really good tidy bit of business. And I think that like it should really come down to like, do you want Watson playing or do you want Julien Gauthier playing? And like Julien Gauthier is actually a play driver. Like I saw him creating offense on his own. And that's was a very difficult task for our bottom six for like the majority of the season. So I take him 10 times out of 10 over Austin Watson. And like, I like Austin Watson's vibes. I think he's an excellent person, but we just need to be a team that like when our fourth line comes out and they're still pumping you with energy and grinding, like that's how teams win cups,
Yeah, no, for sure. And I was actually talking to my partner about this the other day, but I was telling her, I was like, a guy like Cal Clutterbuck, how many years has he been in the league? And he has been a staple on New York's bottom
Yeah.
six for how many years, right? He's just that guy who that's his fit in the lineup, and he's perfectly suitable there. And he doesn't go out of style. Alex Killorn kind of fits that. I mean, he's more of a closer to being like a top six player, obviously, than Cal Clutterbuck, but he's also that guy who he's like your perfect, third line guy who can play up the lineup in injuries. But you need to find guys who can really be caliber depth players on your roster. And we won't get too into the weeds on that right now. Maybe that's more of a summer conversation. But yes, I agree with your statement there. We already touched on Bernard Docker and how Dorion was impressed with him likely, making the team out of camp next season, or at least putting up a good competition for it. So we'll move on to kind of one of the main things that people have also been talking about going into the offseason, and that's going to be DJ Smith. What's going to happen to the coaching going forward? Dorion mentioned DJ Smith does have a contract next season and that he's done everything that the team has asked of him. So you could look at that and be like, oh no, he's coming back. Or some people would be happy he's coming back. But then Dorion said that he is always going to reevaluate every aspect of his team. They wanted to win more games last season, and he said that they won more games. But I do think that there was probably some times in the season where Pierre Dorion was like, oh, we can make the playoffs. And I think he was probably disappointed that they didn't sneak in. So I'm kind of curious on how that how that turns out in the summer, and whether any coaches maybe are let go in this offseason that might pique Dorion's interest. But new ownership is also coming in, so that's something that may be a factor. And on that note, Bennett, I'll throw it over your way. And what are your thoughts on Dorion's comments on DJ Smith and the future of coaching for the Sens?
It was interesting. I think there was a lot that was interesting in this press conference, particularly the parts where Dorion was being asked not only about his future, but the future of DJ Smith. I think ultimately, and the elephant in the room during that press conference, I mean, they did allude to it, was the fact that, the team is for sale and there will imminently be new owners that will probably want to make some relatively significant changes when they purchase the team. And I think Dorion's future and DJ's future are sort of out of their own hands at this point. I think it's unlikely that Dorion would fire DJ in the next 2 weeks or 3 weeks before an ownership change happens. I also think it's unlikely that DJ would stay beyond this season. I think ownership is going to come in. They're almost certainly going to have a guy that they have their eye on, probably for both the GM position and the coaching position. So I think it's quite likely that both will be gone within the next month or two. And yeah, I mean, Dorion said that Timmy and Brady think the world of DJ, and they're like the core of this team. Interestingly, I mean, like, this is just like a total sidebar, but it was always Brady and Shabbat and Brady and Shabbat and Brady and Shabbat. And now that Timmy has like cemented his like superstar status, he's starting to get lumped in there with Brady as like the soul of this team, which is interesting. I don't think it reflects poorly on Shabbat or anything. It's just like, you know, you have a 21-year-old superstar who's a 90-point player. It's like now he has the ear of Dorion, which is interesting. Anyway, yeah, I mean, I don't think DJ's going to be here next season. I don't really think he deserves to be here next season. But I think that, you know, he leaves with, if he does leave, he does so without burning any bridges. He does so, I think a lot of the players on this team really like him. And whereas you've alluded, you know, there could be players like possibly DeBrincat, Giroux, we're sort of speculating might not think that DJ is that great of a coach. But some players do. And so ultimately, I think that, you know, he can probably leave here with his head held high, and Dorion as well, if that's the case, as it may be. But yeah, I just don't see a scenario where they're all back next season. I think that it's such an easy win to just come in, say, we're sick of losing, we're new ownership, we're going to put this team on a level path, and go in and like get your guys for those positions. I mean, like, I can't really see a scenario where that doesn't happen.
Yeah, and going back to the comment that Dorion made, like, we wanted to win more games, and we did. It's like, yeah, you added a 40-goal scorer and a future Hall of Famer. Like, I mean, writing on the wall is there that they absolutely were going to win more games because of that. But I will die on this hill. If you have a quality coach, that this Senators team is playing tonight, period. Like, we only missed
by like wins. 6 points, or
all we needed was 4 wins, and we're in a playoff spot. Like, it comes down to being a results oriented and driven business. You're not winning games, you don't have a job. And Ian Mendez, credit to him, said it in the presser today, said, you have been around for 6 seasons and you have made the playoffs once. How, you know, like, other GMs have not had as long a leash. And I almost think he said leash, you know, like, Dorion, if Dorion was let go, then I would be, you know, bummed, because he really made a push for it at the end. But at a point, you also have to look at it as like a little too late. You know, you had the opportunity to go out and get some better pro scouts and all this stuff. But Bennett, you made a great point. New ownership might come in, see Kyle Dubas's contract is coming up, and throw a butt ton of money at that guy. They see that, you know, the Penguins are in a bit of a change, and who knows, Sullivan gets let go, they keep him, you know, or they go get him, like, all this stuff. But the fact of the matter is I think at a point this team needs to move forward from this coaching staff, because I don't think they are good enough to, well, they weren't good enough to get us to the playoffs. It's NBA playoffs time. That means big hoops action with DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. Get in on the excitement of every game with the touch of a button. New customers can make a $5 pregame moneyline bet and score $150 in bonus bets if their team wins. Plus, everyone can score a no-sweat same-game parlay every day during the NBA playoffs. Open the DraftKings Sportsbook app, opt in, and place a same-game parlay on any NBA game. If it doesn't hit, you'll get a bonus bet back up to $10. The Golden State Warriors are always going to the finals, and they're a pretty safe bet in my opinion. Download the app now and sign up with code THPN. New customers can make a $5 pregame moneyline bet and score $150 in bonus bets if their team wins. Only at DraftKings Sportsbook.
Welcome back, everyone. Thanks for watching or listening so far. If you like what you heard or see on our channel here today, then please drop us a follow on Twitter at the Senstennial. We're also on Instagram, Facebook, the Senstennial Podcast. You can find us all over the place, I think.
Hell yeah.
Anyway, yeah, thank you so much for listening or watching, and we'll get the second part of our show underway. And I wanted to pose kind of some open-ended questions to Bennett and Matt and kind of take them by surprise here. So I'm going to ask you some thoughts on the season, and I'll kick things off with you, Bennett. I want to know, during the season, what gave you optimism for next season?
Well, what gave me optimism is that this team took a serious step this year. For a couple of seasons before this, we'd seen signs of life, flickers of possibility, but we hadn't really meaningfully done better from, say, the shortened COVID season to like where it was just a Canadian division to last year where we were still basically a basement team. This year we actually took a step. You know, the Sens had 13 more points than we did last year. We had 6 more wins. We were 6 points outside of a playoff spot at year end, as opposed to 27 last season. That's a major improvement. And I know that there's a lot of other shifts within the Eastern Conference that allowed that to happen, the point spread in particular. But this team undeniably got better. And part of that, as you alluded to in the top half, was the acquisitions of DeBrincat and Giroux, who made our top 6 a lot better than it was last season. And that was even without having Norris around. But I mean, you also saw major improvement from guys like Stützle and Brady. I mean, those guys had career years. Brady, 35 goals, 83 points, a career best. Tim Stützle, 39 goals, 90 points, a career best. Brady was in the second full year of his big boy contract. Tim was in the last year of his ELC. So that, his oh god, I had his contract info right in front of me here a second ago.
It should be 8 years.
Oh, sorry, here it is. Yeah, it's
8.4. Yeah,
8 years, 8.4 million average. That's going to kick in next season. It's going to look like a bargain because he had an absolute
like a bargain.
It already does, yeah. So I mean, like that's serious points for optimism. We saw individual improvements, we saw collective improvements, and if we can add some goaltending that we haven't been getting, then we're a playoff team. That's it. So, like you said, 5-6 wins were there. It is not that fine of a margin.
And I'll pitch that same one over to Matt. Matt, what gave you optimism for next season?
Oof, so much. I think finally addressing defense and really, really going for an improvement with Jacob Chychrun. We've been talking about that fella for far too long, and we finally brought him home. If only we drafted him instead of Logan Brown, but hey, who the heck knows? I thought that was really, really good. Going out and getting Alex DeBrincat and bringing in Claude Giroux, like these guys are all-star level players, and to an extent they showed it this year. Like, as we said, Alex DeBrincat had a bit of a down year, but he's a guy that I would really, really like to keep around because I think he started playing some of his best hockey at the end of this season. I saw him really driving play and making things happen. And I would just love to see him with a legitimate top 6 center. Shane Pinto did what he could this season, but I would have liked to see DeBrincat play with Stu and look forward to him with a full season knock on with Norris next year. I really, really liked the optimism and vibes around Eric Brandstrom, the old franchise, Bilbo Brandstrom, if you will. I love that guy. He was excellent all season. I would even argue our second best defenseman. Some nights even our first. That guy was really good this season. He deserves a lot of praise, and the vibes were there this season with, and the best part, our attendance was up 83% this year.
Yeah.
That's nuts.
Yeah.
It was awesome seeing the barn banging.
Games were a lot more fun this year to go to, for sure.
Absolutely. And being at the Columbus game March 5th, Pride Night, great night, and hearing the "We Want Playoffs," that was crazy. And it was a really, really good experience all season. I went to probably a lifetime high, and that's why I'm optimistic there, Matt.
All right. Love it. Love the answers. So now I'm going to switch things around and pose to Bennett. What are you left worrying about for next season?
It would not be an exaggeration to say that the Sens goaltending woes legitimately keep me up at night. The goaltending was not a strength last season. It was not. Like, Forsberg was pretty good, but we still had Matt Murray on the roster, just dragging the whole team down with him. And our goaltending actually got worse this season. Our goaltending actually regressed. Like last year, our average save percentage was a shade above 900. This year, it was 895. And that is really bad. That is seriously bad. And again, harping on this, like a small improvement in that overall save percentage number, and we're a playoff team. Like, literally, like, we are so 6 points out of a playoff spot. If we had a league average 905 save percentage, we're a playoff team. That's it. And that is not that high of a bar at this level. It really isn't. It should be the bare minimum. Like, if you see a team's starting goalie and they have a 905 save percentage, you're like, ooh, it's kind of not great, but it is what it is, I guess. And that would have been enough for us, but we couldn't even get that. I don't think that our young goalies are going to be ready for this team to be competitive on their backs in the next 2 or 3 seasons when we're going to want to be competitive. And I don't think it's going to be easy or even feasible to get a legitimate good starting goalie in the trade market or in free agency, because those guys don't get walked and they don't get traded. Goalies are too valuable. Like, if somebody were to call up, Barry Trotz in Nashville next season and say, hey, UC Saros, what's the dealio? He'd tell them to go fuck themselves. Like, it's like, why would you ever trade him? He's so much better than anyone you could possibly replace him then. Same with Vasilevsky, same with, Hellebuck. Like, these guys aren't available. Shesterkin, Sorokin, like, we can't get those guys. And they don't grow on trees. And that's, we don't even need someone that good. We need someone a little bit less good than that. And even that is an ask. Like, we traded Gustafsson for Talbot and we burned ourselves in that one. Like, Talbot came here and was not good. And Gustafsson is outplaying Marc-Andre Fleury in Minnesota this year. I don't know if Gustafsson could have done that here, but, I'd be interested to see what Gustafsson could do in a hypothetical scenario next season with the defensive core that we have now. That could have been interesting. Like, if we had, again, we're completely into what if territory now, but a Forsberg Gustafsson tandem next year with an actually good Sens D-core, that could be enough to get us into the postseason. At least then we'll see. But I don't know, man. I think Talbot was an experiment that went awry, and I don't think there's an easy fix to make our goaltending a lot better next year.
No, that's totally fair. And I think of the offseason moves that made the summer of Pierre what it was, Talbot was the one that truly did not work out as people expected. I think Tyler Mott was a nice addition, but people's expectations were a lot lower for him, and he did fine or okay. But yeah, I think the Talbot one was the one that was truly disappointing. But I'll flip the question back to other Matt. What are you left worrying about for next season? Is it also goaltending?
Yeah, I think I definitely is goaltending. There's a couple other things that I'm going to get into, but Bennett raised a great point. Like goaltending was not a strength this season. Going into it though, we were like, "Oh my god, this is the most capable goaltending tandem we've had in quite possibly like ever." You know, you had a guy who was an all-star last year, and you had a guy who I believe Forsberg had like a 918 save percentage.
Yeah.
Things were looking sick.
Mhm.
And then Talbot breaks his ribs, and then Forsberg, you know, actually like Forsberg was playing well, but as soon as Talbot was ready, like DJ just thrusted him in. And this is the issue I have with DJ. So Bennett, you asked, like, how does goaltending get better? It starts with a defensive system. And Philip Gustafson called out the Ottawa Senators defensive system by saying, like, yeah, it was hard playing as a goalie in Ottawa because of just how things were. And nobody's saying he's wrong.
Yeah.
Like Philip Gustafson is behind frickin' Linus Ullmark in save percentage this year. That guy is surefire winning the Vezina, and we let Gustafson go probably too early. I think we can all agree. And
I have far more faith in Gustafson as like a potential goalie of the future than I do in like Sogard or
and I completely agree. I was always the highest on Gustafson out of anyone, even when we had Decord. And I was a Gustafson, defender when he wasn't great, but he would have gotten us 6 points. That's 6 points. That's all we needed. But it comes down to what keeps me up at night is the fact that if Dorion is still GM, there is a chance that DJ Smith stays. And I legitimately think that DJ is a hindrance to this team's development going forward because he has developed it to this point now. And I thank him for that. He's done what he needed to do. But now we need a legitimate coach to take us to the next level. Because, what was it? That Dallas assistant coach was like, I don't even know what system they're playing. And there's just so many questions. Why are we playing dump and chase hockey with a 40 goal scorer, guy who was on pace for 90 points last year? Like all of this stuff that it just doesn't make sense. And I think there are guys out there that would just be a vast improvement. And I like DJ as a person a lot. I think he's a great guy. And I'm hoping this is like the last podcast I ever have to harp on DJ Smith because I think he is a great person, but he is not a very good coach. And if we go out and Bennett, you make a great point. Somebody was like, what about DeBrincat for Saros? I was like, that's not getting Saros.
Yeah.
Like, it's not. And it's so hard to find a starting goalie if you're not developing them yourselves. There are very few that could possibly be on the market. I know Vejmelka has been exceptional in Arizona for what he has had to do with the team in front of him. And that's a guy that I would very much look into. But I also know Forsberg is a good goaltender. So you just need somebody who's also going to come in and be consistent. Is that Aiden Hill from Las Vegas? Is it Nedeljkovic from Detroit? I know he's been rough, but their defense is seemingly worse than ours. So stuff like there are guys, but you're absolutely right. Finding a goalie is not going to be easy.
Yeah, and it'll be interesting to see what happens in Philadelphia because Daniel Briere did make it known that basically anyone was on the table. And, a guy like Carter Hart, he's going into the last year of his deal next season. He will be an RFA. being paid just shy of $4 million next season. Again, didn't have the most phenomenal stats this season or even last season. Had a 905 save percentage last year, 907 this year, but he's shown that he can be quite a capable goalie. And the one time he did get into the playoffs with the Flyers, he ended up playing 14 games and had a 926 save percentage. So he's a guy who has playoff experience at a young age, a guy who has good stats. Even when Philadelphia has been utter garbage the last couple of years, he's actually been fine. So that's a guy that, if I'm Pierre Dorion going into the summer, you have to make cap room one way or another. And I don't know if that means, trying to buy out a guy like Mathieu Joseph, which I really don't want to see that happen because I personally think he is definitely a player who could rebound, but is something where, if I'm the Ottawa Senators and I'm trying to make cap room, he's a guy who might make sense. But we'll see what happens. There's a lot to discuss on that front that maybe we can do at a future date, but I want to get to the Senstennial Awards. Now, like I mentioned at the top of the show, this is our annual awards that we give to the players who are most impressive, most disappointing, or most surprising. And most surprising can be positive or negative, or just something different. Like, I'm surprised this player made to the NHL this year, maybe played limited minutes, but I'd like to see more of them. It can really be anything. And that's why I like the most surprising award. But we'll start out with our most impressive. And before I give my answer, I'll flip it to Bennett to give his.
Yeah, I mean, it's low-hanging fruit. We've talked about him all episode long, but Tim Stützle is here, and he is our number one center. If the record will state that 3 years ago when we drafted him, I told our dozen listeners at the time that he was going to be our number one center and that was a lock and that we have solved that biggest and hardest problem to solve. And here we stand on top of the mountain knowing that we have done it. He is a first-line center. He is a 90-point player. He is 21 years old. He is only going to get better. This guy, he is the absolute star of this team. Tkachuk is the leader of this team, but Stützle is the star. I mean, the two of them have turned themselves into monsters, and they both still have room to grow. Stützle could very easily be a year-in, year-out 100-point player, playing at center for the Senators. Like, that is insane. Like, we have literally never had that, even when this team was like competing for cups. So yeah, I mean, that is an absolute huge win. And he was so impressive this year. I mean, like, just every single night he did things that nobody else on this team can do. Every single game I saw him do elite offensive things, and I saw him track back and hustle. He has an absolutely like impeccable mentality as a player. This guy does not get boomed when the team's doing poorly. He does not hang his teammates out to dry. He is like ravenous to get those wins. This is a guy who competes hard every night. He plays with a high amount of skill, a high amount of speed. I mean, like, he's an incredible player. He's probably the best player I have seen in a Sens uniform since vintage Carlson. And yeah, just what a guy.
All right. Well, Matt, how about yourself? Who did you think was most deserving of your most impressive Senstennial Award this season?
This is that low-hanging fruit. Num, num, num. It's Timbo, the himbo Stützle. He's incredible. He is everything that we expected him to be. He's dunked on every single draft analyst I've ever seen. Like, everyone. Nobody thought he would be a center and an effective, defensively sound center at that. Some people were saying Lucas Raymond was going to be better, all this stuff. And like, Stützle has eclipsed everything we could have possibly hoped for. We knew he would be like a 90-point superstar, but now he's going to be a 100-point player and a center. And just, Bennett, you pointed out all of the stuff he does really well, but he also like wears his heart on his sleeve and owns his faults. Yeah. He will say, I'm playing terribly, and be on a 6 or 7 game point streak
Oh
but
yeah,
he's like,
the amount of times that Timmy
Yeah.
had like a ringside interview after getting first star, and he had like 4 points that night, and he's like, oh well, it wasn't a great game, but everyone worked hard tonight. It's just like this guy is like literally just like running circles around other
Yeah.
teams, and he's like, oh, it wasn't a great night for me.
He's like, I'm playing horribly. Like, Ian Mendes is back there. He's like, dude, you have like 12 points in the last 13 games. Like, I don't know what you like. All of this stuff is just it's amazing. And I had to look, and I remember some comparisons to guys like Patrick Kane and Mitch Marner. And Mitch Marner had 99 points this season, and I believe he makes about $11 million. And at the peak of Stützle's career, he will be making $8.4 million. And like, he will be a bargain.
Yeah.
Like, he already is a bargain, but he will be even more of a bargain and eclipsing the 100-point total. And nobody saw that one coming. I can't believe Dorion was able to get that done. Like, you have to imagine it, like Tkachuk was just texting Timmy all year, being like, just sign. Let's do it at FanFest.
Yeah.
Like, let's go for it.
Yeah.
And they did. Like, the vibes with that kid are immaculate. And I haven't loved a player this much since like vintage Kyle Turris on Bennett's wall there. But yeah, like, I loved that guy because he was a third overall pick as well. But everything about Turris's game was just excellent. But Stützle's game is similar to that, but on major, like, Michael Jordan special drink from Space Jam.
All right. Well, the only other thing I was going to add to the Stimmy 2
Stimmy 2. Let's go.
That one is definitely going to get thrown back in my face. I know that. The other thing I was going to add to the Timmy Stu conversation is apparently he's a great character off the ice too. Just like really humble, nice dude. Apparently he's really good to the staff of the CTC as well, according to one source that the Senstennial has discussed or talked to about Timmy Stu. So that's really nice to hear as well, that he's just a good person. That's always nice when you have an all-star player like that. But for me, for my most impressive, I think you guys will know I'm going with. I knew that I couldn't have it be consensus Timmy Stu, even though I love the kid. So I'm going with the Claude G Money Giroux. I think when Pierre Dorion made that signing, everyone was excited. Everyone was like, okay, Claude Giroux coming to Ottawa, he'll be a really good, second line player, teach the guys how to be better at faceoffs, and just give them experience of a guy who's been on some deep playoff runs. And that's really what you want to get out of a veteran and a guy who can still play damn hockey at a high level. That has been a struggle for Ottawa when acquiring veterans, either through trade or free agency. So Claude Giroux came in this season, and I don't think anybody expected him to reach a career high in goals in a season. That is phenomenal. And, man, all power to him. The guy was fading earlier in the season. For those listening and not watching, I did use air quotes, don't worry. But yeah, he had a hell of a season, and I can't believe he finished, above 80 points, had 35 goals, was great defensively, and then was a great offensive player. And he produced that number of points while not even being on the first unit power play. And he's been known to be a very effective power play guy for his career. So that was really interesting to me. He didn't really play on the penalty kill all that much, but I don't really care because he's doing so much in every other facet of the game. So really happy that he signed, really happy with what he did in his first season here. And man, even if he regresses like a bit next season, I don't even mind, because he still has the skating, he still has the shot, he still has the silky mitts, the hockey IQ, like everything, he still has it. And that's so important. And he's going to be going on 36. It reminds me of like Alfie, when Alfie was in his prime years. His prime years weren't in his mid late 20s. They were into his mid 30s. So I'm kind of getting the same vibe where Claude Giroux's just fit into that really nice part of his career where he's just been around so much of the game that he's just so comfortable with everything that he doesn't have to rely on being the fastest guy on the ice or, having the best shot on the ice. His game is just very complete. And that ends my ramble on Claude Giroux and why he earns my most impressive Senator award.
I like it.
For our next one, we're going into the negatives, but don't worry, folks. We still have most surprising after this, but we're going into the most disappointing award. And so this time I'll throw it to Matt first to discuss who he thought was the most disappointing this season.
This was a hard one. I had somebody laid out for most of this episode, and then I decided to change it. And that player, the most disappointing, is Drake Batherson. He still had a pretty good year, all things considered, but I don't think I was ever frustrated with a player more than him this season. This was a guy that had the Dallas Stars sending guys after him because he was hitting people too much. I don't think I saw a game where he was physically dominant at all this season. That portion of his game was absolutely gone. And then came the defensive liability. And, I know a lot of people, and myself included, think, plus minus is a stupid stat, but it's also a good indicator of the team defensive ability, your line's defensive ability. And Alex DeBrincat was also very low considering, but Drake was noticeably lackadaisical on some of his back checks. The intensity just wasn't there. And from what I understand, his injury it just healed recently. And he said they said it was going to take about a year to be 100%. And now I feel it. And I noticed Batherson getting better, but some of the habits were still there. And so I'm hoping going into this next season, we really get to see Drake at 100% and just being an absolute monster, because he really is a power forward, and we didn't see that at all this season. He was a very much perimeter player that was benefiting on the power play.
Honestly, that's not a player expected, but totally deserving, and I think he makes some fair points. So Bennett, flip back to you. Most disappointing player for you this season?
Yeah, I was also surprised with your pick, Matt, but I do not disagree whatsoever. I think a very deserving winner of this unpleasant award. But I'm sticking with the theme tonight of going with low-hanging fruit, which is obviously Cam Talbot. 898 save percentage, 2.98 goals against. This guy was brought in to provide stability and some veteran leadership and nous to our goaltending tandem, and he simply did not do that. Our goaltending got worse with him, not better. He regressed personally compared to his results from last year. It was a one-year experiment that cost us our potential goalie of the future and yielded very little in return, while also just jamming up our crease. Where, I think we saw that throwing Sogard or Marilainen in this season would not have been helpful to them in their development. Marilainen only played 2 games, looked great in one, looked not good in the other one. Sogard played a lot of games, didn't really look good very often. So these guys weren't ready, but I think Talbot still managed to distinguish himself with his lack of results this season, even among a relatively poor crop of Sens defenders. The last thing that you wanted to see when you brought in Talbot and you said you were going to run with the Talbot and Forsberg tandem was an end of the season where we played 7 starting goalies all year long. That is never a situation that you want to be in. And Talbot just, he cost a lot to get, and he just made this team worse, and that sucks.
No, also very valid, and honestly kind of who I expected Matt to go with, being our resident goalie fanatic here.
That
So
was the guy.
Yeah,
just to
I'm
clarify.
sure that was the guy you were ready to just absolutely lay into. And when we did it like 20 minutes ago, you're like, all right, maybe we'll like
yeah.
Yeah,
have some.
I got
This
all
guy's a
the
family,
vibes out, like
But I'm like, no, screw it. Like I'm going
Yeah.
in hard.
It's
So-
like he cost a lot and cost us a
Yeah.
lot.
Yeah.
No, very fair. I think mine may be a bit controversial. I hope not. I hope I don't get too many spiteful comments on this one. But my most disappointing is actually going to be the one and only Josh Norris. And honestly, I think a lot of people watching or listening will be like, okay, well, why Josh Norris? He barely played. And I think for me, that's really it.
Yeah.
He starting the season, the Ottawa Senators looked great through 6 games before he was injured. They looked very solid. Or sorry, I believe it was maybe 5 games that he played before being injured. They looked really good. The depth was able to shine because the top 6 was able to produce. And he goes down with a shoulder injury, and it's like, oh, and it sucks. And whether it's his fault or not, it sucks. But I think the decision to, not go with Ottawa's doctors and then get consultations, everything, totally understandable as a player. But for me to not go the surgery route and to just rehab it, I think was a bit questionable. And I'm not going to pretend I'm a doctor or know tons about medicine. But it just, I don't know. I got this bad feeling of him just rehabbing it rather than getting surgery, especially when we live in a day and age where surgeries are so successful at doing what they do and making a person better. It was unfortunate because then he comes back and, he gets a beauty one-timer in one of the games he's back, and then he gets injured in his 3rd game back. And, then it's like, oh, he's getting surgery. He's out for the rest of the season. And it's like, if he had gotten surgery the first time, maybe he wouldn't have had to get it the second time. Maybe he would have played through the final half of the season or whatever it ended up being. And I think that Ottawa definitely would be in a playoff spot, even with poor goaltending, if Josh Norris had been in the lineup for even half the season. And so I know some will say it's not fair to criticize a guy, especially when I don't have medical background and I'm questioning, his choice on medical help and all that. But for me, it was just very disappointing, expecting this guy to come in, play with Drake Batherson and Alex DeBrincat, and then he's just gone for basically the rest of the season. And to me, it was just disappointing to see that, whether it was not entirely his fault or otherwise. So that's my guy. We're going to end things off with the most surprising player. And yeah, I'll go with Ben first this time and give us who your most surprising Senstennial Award goes to.
Yeah, well, I chose to go positive with this one, and I picked Claude Giroux, and you've given him so much love. You honestly, yeah, I mean, like you honestly said everything that I wanted to say, and I would consider substituting Jake Sanderson here, but I was not surprised to see how good he was. So, well, he deserves a shout out. He doesn't deserve this award. I really do have to give it to Giroux. I thought we'd be getting, he'd come in, he'd provide some veteran leadership, win us some face-offs, and give us those, like quote unquote, like intangibles. And if he pitched in, 40, 50 points, I'd have been happy. This guy had not quite a career year because he's had some very impressive seasons in the past, but he had a career best in goals, 79 points, which is great for a 35-year-old. He brought absolutely great vibes on and off the ice. Everyone was absolutely rooting for him. And the night that he scored 1,000 points in his career in the final home game of the season was one of the best Sens memories that I've had, the pleasure of taking in live in the last few years. And like you alluded to, I mean, he's been such an unmitigated win in his first season. I don't even care what happens in the next 2 years. If in the next 2 years he totally regresses, falls off a cliff, but he still wins us some face-offs and brings good vibes and leadership, then I say it's worth it.
All right, summed up beautifully. Matt, I'll flip it over to you. Who are you giving your most surprising Senstennial Award to?
Well, I chose this guy at the start of the season for another reason. I think I selected him most, or something to do with being a bust, or like the expectations being too high. And it's Jake Sanderson. He was the most surprising because he surpassed those expectations that people had of him by like game 6. And Jake Sanderson, I would argue, is already like a top 2 defenseman in the league, in terms of, or
like
on
position,
our team,
yeah.
but positionally, like any team would be lucky to have the guy.
Yeah.
He was extremely good, and I think he's only going to get better. So when I was watching him all season, I was just baffled at how good he was. And I will, eat crow in the sense that I wanted to be cautiously optimistic, but this guy was just like, nah, and just like put it into 6th gear right off the line and went. And he was so impressive, and I can't say enough good things about him.
Yeah, again, can't disagree with you there. And not only that, like it's not just his play, like he just seems so mature out on the ice and how he plays his game, very calm guy. And even when he made mistakes, sometimes they would end up in the back of the net, but also there were times where he made mistakes where he would correct his mistake. He would race back to break up the play, or, if he accidentally turned over the puck, he would make sure to try and win it back, or really put pressure on that forward to make sure he retrieved the puck. So no, really liked his game. But my most surprising is going to be Erik Brannstrom. Got to go with the short king. The first, I wouldn't say half, the first third of the season, I was kind of like, okay, he's been fine, but I could tell like maybe the writing's on the wall. The Sens might move him by the deadline or maybe in the summer. I can't say the same about his second half of the season. Like, man, especially down the stretch, he looked so confident with the puck. He was making really good moves. He finally scored a few goals. How long have you been waiting for Erik Brannstrom to score goals at the NHL level? You love to see that. Analytically, he was almost as good as Artem Zub defensively this season, and actually, in expected goals against was better than Jake Sanderson, but I believe that's likely because of who was partnered with who, but can touch that another time. Ultimately, yeah, he just totally turned his game around and really showed the player that I think Ottawa was hoping for when they traded Mark Stone to get, the best defensive prospect outside the NHL at the time, considered by many. So I can't complain about his season. I think he's done a lot more than I expected, and that's all I need. And now going into the next season, I have zero questions on the blue line. Maybe who fills in the bottom right pairing spot, if you don't have Brannstrom playing, it's offside. But essentially, I'm like, man, like the decor is set. And I don't think we could have said that at any point, even when they went to the Eastern Conference final in 2017, there was never a point since maybe Ottawa's, heydays of the 07 era where they really had a great defensive core. So most surprised by Branny, and yeah, happy for the guy and hope he can continue it on to next season and maybe get a multi-year contract here going forward. On that note, that draws our nice long season closing episode. Thank you everyone who joined us for the duration of this. Really appreciate it. Thankfully, we have a guest coming up in our next episode, so you can get a change of scenery from us bums, and they'll join us. They'll give us their thoughts on the season wrap up, and we're looking forward to giving you guys that video. So thank you so much. Like I said earlier, you can find us on social media at the Senstennial or at Senstennial, depending on the platform. The Senstennial Podcast on YouTube or Spotify or wherever else you get your podcasts. And yeah, we'll be coming back with some new content in the next couple of weeks. So thank you for watching, listening, all your support this season. We're very excited to see the Sens make it to the playoffs next year. It'll happen. You heard it here first. Go Sens, go. We'll see you next time.
Go Sens, go. Later.
Go Sens, go.